Hi, I'm Brian Schroep from Beyondware. In this video, I'll show you how to use our new photo composite tool to layer Beyond Typical's models on top of real-world photography. This feature, available to our Pro subscribers, will help you create some incredibly realistic and effective transportation visualizations in a matter of minutes. I'll walk you through a step-by-step process and show you how the new tools work, plus I'll add some tips along the way. Let's dive in. In a previous video, I showed some tips on how to layer your screenshot renderings from Beyond Typicals on top of ground-level photography, which required some work outside of Beyond Typicals. It got such a great response that we decided to build this workflow into the program, which allows you to create both static image and video renders of your roadway on top of an imported image. Creating a high-quality photo composite in a short amount of time is best done by following a step-by-step process, which I'll discuss in this video. I'll also show you some of the new tools we've put into Beyond Typicals to help you do that. The first step towards layering a Beyond Typicals model over an image is acquiring that image. That seems simple enough, but there are some important things to consider. First, you want to make sure the picture is suitable for using as a background of a roadway rendering. This means you probably want to get one with high resolution and good lighting, and preferably one without a lot of obstructions or undesirable vertical elements that you wouldn't want in the background of a finished rendering. Some examples of these undesirable elements are parked cars, pedestrians, light poles, or trees that ultimately might be out of place in a proposed condition. If getting a picture without those obstructions isn't possible, you could consider touching up that photo before importing it into Beyond Typicals, either with a Photoshop expert or using some of those magic eraser tools that use AI to easily remove unwanted elements. Also, it's important to tilt and crop your image to make sure that it's as flat of a horizon as possible before importing, since our Beyond Typicals camera can't be tilted like this to match a skewed picture. The next thing you'll want to do is recreate the existing conditions of that photo in Beyond Typicals. Even if you don't want to render the existing conditions, you'll need something modeled that matches the lanes and widths in the photo so that you have an apples-to-apples comparison when lining up your camera position in a later step. The more precise, the better, but even a rough approximation of an edge-to-edge width can still be effective for a composite visualization. If I don't have as-builts or a topo survey, I generally go find that road segment in Google Earth or Google Maps and measure the widths there. When recreating the existing conditions, I try to keep this as simple as possible. I'll turn off traffic and any other visual obstructions like the static vehicles in a parking lane, and I don't worry too much about the labels either. I'm generally just trying to get a skeleton of the roadway so that it's easier to line up the camera after I bring in the image. The last part of this step is adjusting the section length. Since these photos often capture quite a long stretch of road into the horizon, I'll want to replicate that in Beyond Typicals as best I can. By going into settings, you can adjust the length of the section up to 1,000 feet long. I'll also note you might want to pay attention to which part of the photo you're going to be layering over. For instance, if you have a quick build road improvement that isn't touching the curbs or sidewalk, then maybe you don't want to add in the sidewalks to your existing condition model. A rule of thumb I'd recommend is if your project isn't touching it, you probably don't need to recreate it unless you think it will help you line up your camera. Now it's time to import the photo. You can do this in our render menu, which is the red circle button in the toolbar on the right. At the very top of this menu, you can click on the Photo Compositing tab, where you'll see a Layers subheading and a button to import a new layer. Clicking this button will pull up a dialog box where you can navigate to the saved image you want to bring in. By default, this window displays PNG image files, but you can choose JPEG in the drop-down box if your image is in that format. I'll first start with this red gradient square to show some of the settings and controls over the visibility, scale, and position of the imported image. By default, the image is in the background. This is controlled by the occlusion distance value here. This is a rather large number to move the image forward and back, so we've also provided shortcuts to move the image to front or to back directly. Before going into all these other image settings, I want to go over to the rendering tab at the top and note the importance of the resolution and aspect ratio of your model. In many cases, you may not be aware that the XY resolution and aspect ratio is an important setting for your image and video renders. You'll see that on my screen, toggling this preview aspect ratio button on and off doesn't change anything from the default 4K resolution setting. That's because my X and Y proportions of my screen and Beyond Typical's window match this 16:9 ratio exactly. But say I wanted to render a square, vertical, or panoramic image from Beyond Typicals. I would want to adjust my resolution settings to get that desired output shape that's not 16:9. When preview aspect ratio is toggled on, you can see how the black bars appear and change around the model view so that you can preview the actual output before rendering. If I toggle that off, I can see the full screen of the model without those black bars. The aspect ratio is very important to keep in mind with photo compositing because the image imports are dependent on your output aspect ratio once you start rendering. With preview aspect ratio turned off, you could go through great lengths to line up your camera to an image size to fit your Beyond Typicals window. But if your rendered output shape is any different than that window, for instance, maybe you have a taskbar at the bottom of your screen so your window isn't exactly 16:9, that different aspect ratio may shift the image during your render. By default, clicking on the Photo Compositing tab will toggle on the preview aspect ratio setting automatically to help you avoid issues like this. But just keep that preview aspect ratio setting in mind when you're setting up your photo composites. You're going to want to know the size of your output before you start lining up your camera. So, with preview aspect ratio toggled on, I'll head back to the image alignment settings. We have shortcuts for positions like center, top left, and middle right. Plus, there are shortcuts for fit screen height or fit screen width. All of these alignment options will maintain your original image scale. In this example, the square is still square, and the fit screen width alignment is just cropping the top and bottom of the image. Usually, these fit options are best for photo compositing because they won't distort the image. You'll see if I use the full screen toggle, it will stretch that image to the aspect ratio, which might distort the original image. After aligning the image, I can further adjust the scale of the image, either proportionately or disproportionately. And there are X and Y offset controls if I want to move that image as well. There's a few more image control settings I'll show. First is scene blend adjustment. This is a sliding scale setting that will slightly blend the background image with the modeled elements. If you look closely, you can see a faint outline around the modeled elements in front of an image. This line generally doesn't show up in renderings, but if you're looking to remove it from the model view, you can increase this adjustment setting to remove it. The most important image setting for the next step is the opacity setting. This spin bar allows you to adjust the transparency of the image, which will be vital for lining up your Beyond Typicals model camera with the imported image. Finally, in the layer list, there is a pencil icon that allows you to rename the image layer. There's an eyeball icon to the right of the layer name that can be used to hide and show the image layer, and a trash can icon to delete the image from the model. Before moving on to the next step, I'll bring in my background image for this project. First, I'll double check my render output size and aspect ratio, then import the JPEG image. This image is a larger resolution than my aspect ratio, so I'll use fit screen width to shrink it to my Beyond Typicals window. Now it's time to adjust your Beyond Typicals camera to line up as closely as possible with the imported image. This is probably the most challenging part of the photo compositing process, but we've recently added some new camera controls that should help get it into position. Once you do, you can save that camera position and come back to it at any time. First, with the image in front, I'll reduce the opacity and show you can get pretty close to lining up your camera to the transparent image just by eyeballing it and using your mouse to rotate, zoom, and pan the camera. This might get you about 80% of the way there and could be good enough in some cases. When doing it like this, I zoom back as far as I can so there's more length of road in front of the camera, and I'm trying to position the camera over the same lane that's in the photo while also lining up the lane lines and curb lines. As I mentioned, we've added some camera settings and controls to help get you from 80% to 100% of an accurate camera position. First, I want to talk about field of view. This is a setting that will widen or narrow the lens of the camera, where a very high field of view is similar to a fisheye lens that captures a much wider background area, and a very low field of view is just the opposite. It narrows how much background you see and sort of magnifies the horizon line. This is an important setting in photo compositing because changing the field of view will basically reset any progress you've made on camera adjustments. This might need some trial and error to get it right, but just anecdotally, I'll say most of the photography I've used in photo compositing looks best with a field of view value around 80 to 100. You shouldn't need to spend too much time fine-tuning this. Getting it in the ballpark should be good enough to get a good-looking photo composite. Here's an example of a project where I spent some time trying to align my Beyond Typicals model with a couple of different fields of view. You'll see both of the curb lines line up pretty well in the front, but there are some differences in the horizon that are noticeable. In this case, the field of view 40 is a better result, particularly when looking at the size and shape of the cars in the front of the model. As a rule of thumb, to fix your field of view, I'd advise you to look at the far end of the modeled roadway. If you need the roadway to get skinnier in the back, you should increase your field of view. Alternatively, if the road looks too narrow, decrease the field of view to widen out the back end of the road. The rest of the camera settings are all new to Beyond Typicals version 2.4. Now you can see and edit the X, Y, and Z coordinates of the camera, plus change the pitch or the up-down angle and yaw or the left-right angle of the camera. The camera distance setting zooms the camera in and out. To put it generically, the top line is the pan feature, or clicking and dragging the middle mouse wheel. The second line is the rotation you get from clicking and dragging the right mouse button. And the third line is the zoom you would get from scrolling your mouse wheel up and down. By using these specific inputs, you can incrementally change the camera position and angle to get it where you want it for your photo composite. You can either click the arrows on the left and right of the spin bar, or you can type in specific values to get the camera into place. Once you're happy with your camera position, I like to slide the opacity up and down to double check it. Head to the Rendering tab at the top and click Save Current Camera. I recommend renaming this to something like Composite Camera. That way in the future, either you or someone else working in the file knows what it's for and can prevent losing the work or duplicating the work to get that camera into place. After you've taken the time to set your aspect ratio and line up your camera and save its position, you're now free to finish building your Beyond Typical section model. With that camera position saved, you can now turn off the image and freely navigate around the model to finish your visualization. At this time, you can focus on building a proposed condition, a set of alternatives, or construction staging phases, basically whatever else you want to visualize with Beyond Typicals. In my example, I've duplicated the existing conditions to create a proposed improvement. You'll see I'm changing lanes, striping, textures, and sidewalk elements in that proposed phase. You can also clean up traffic settings, adjust your labels, and add any assets that you want to your visualization. One tip here is before finalizing your labels and placed assets, it's a good idea to reload your camera position to make sure those are showing up into view where you want them. Now all that's left is to render your output. With everything else set up, all you need to do is make sure you reload your saved camera and get your photo into place. That means making sure the photo layer is turned on, the opacity is scaled up, and the image sent to the background. From there, renders are just like any others you might do in Beyond Typicals. You can render either a static image of your model with the screenshot button, or if you want to export a video, you can set the desired video length, frame rate, and other settings, and then click Record Video. While that renders, I'll recommend you check out our photo composite page at beyondware.com. I've added a link in the video description. There you can find some more tips on what you can do with the photo composite tool, like adding watermarks to the front of a model for corporate logos or project branding. Plus, there's some other tips like using multiple layers to render with foreground elements, like buildings that are partially blocking the road from a drone photo. It looks like that video render is finished, so let's check it out. Using Beyond Typicals to layer photorealistic 3D models on top of real-world photography is going to help you communicate transportation improvements where they matter most. We're excited to see how you use this tool for your projects. If you have any more questions or examples you'd like to share, please reach out to me at brian@beyondware.com. Thanks for watching.